What is artist James Turrell creating inside a Flagstaff crater has been at it for 40 years. Flagstaff, Roden Crater rises far from homes and paved roads, separated from civilization not just by distance but by a sternly worded no trespassing sign at the only gap in a barbed wire fence. It stands alone in Arizona's high desert northeast of Flagstaff, an extinct volcano smoothed by eons of wind and rain, a formidable island in a sea of grass. Rising 600 feet, the formation blends into a vast landscape of rounded hills and brush-covered cinder cones, allowing Roden Crater to hide its secret in plain sight. Within this geological dome, one man has worked off and on for nearly 40 years to transform it into a work of art designed to bring the celestial to earth. More, James Turrell, artist, has blazed a career in light, shadow and illusion. Noted artist James Turrell, whose installations manipulate light and shadows to turn ordinary settings into mystical spaces, has tunneled through, hollowed out and sculpted Roden Crater over the past 4 decades. When Turrell is finished, and no one has any idea when that might be, the modest cinder cone volcano will be perhaps the largest, if not the most significant, piece of land art in the world. Not that anyone outside Turrell's fan base, or the art world in general, would know. Turrell toils in relative obscurity. Roden Crater has hosted well-heeled patrons as well as construction crews busy on the latest phase of Turrell's life work. Still, odds are good you've never heard of it. Over the past 2 years, a little light has been shed on the project. Skystone Foundation, the project's fundraising arm, posts updates to Roden Crater's website and Facebook page, largely to solicit donors. The project, which the 75-year-old Turrell started in 1979, also is on Instagram, and has been profiled a handful of times in the media. But if you drop by the Flagstaff Visitor Center for directions to Roden Crater, which very few people do, you are very politely urged to abandon such plans because there are no maps. The route is tricky and the crater is off-limits to the public. All of which is correct, giving off an Area 51 vibe enhanced by a journey over unpaved back roads through cattle country. Which is just what Ryan Sawyer was thinking as he walked along the barbed wire fence about a mile from Roden Crater. At least the New York City resident was fairly certain it was Roden Crater, since it matched the photos he'd seen. For followers of James Turrell, Roden Crater is their mecca. And this trip into the high desert, Sawyer admitted, was much like a pilgrimage. When he and a fellow Turrell fan headed out in a rented SUV to find the dormant volcano, Sawyer wasn't sure he was on the right track. He put his faith in Google Maps, which traced an iffy route along a sketchy back road. With each rise they crested, the two expected to see the legendary hill. There were a few times they nearly turned around, Sawyer said, but thoughts of seeing Turrell's sketches of the project more than 20 years ago spurred them on. I remember thinking how incredible it was that he was transforming a crater, Sawyer said. I knew one day I'd have to see it. That day arrived when he and his friend, who preferred not to be named, arrived in Flagstaff for a wedding. They rented a car with every intention of seeing the Grand Canyon. Instead they headed northeast to see what few people had. When they first noticed a sizable bump on the horizon, they felt it had to be Roden Crater. A few miles later, they saw the no trespassing sign and were sure of it. Sawyer pulled off the road and parked on a bare patch of ground next to the fence. He said he and his friend then walked along the crude barbed wire fence hoping to get a better look while being careful not to tread on prohibited territory. After a quarter-mile stroll, a man in a pickup truck pulled up on the opposite side of the fence. He asked us nicely to go back to our car and head back the way we came, that we were on private land, Sawyer said. They did just that. Neither had expected to get as close as they did. Sawyer said he was happy with photos and, even better, the story of his expedition. Of course I'd love to see inside. The photos look amazing, he said. Maybe one day. If not for a flight over Roden Crater in the 1970s. A project nearly 40 years in the making may never have been started. Turrell had already established himself as one of the country's most talented artists when it came to manipulation of light and shadow. His career would take a dramatic turn when, On a flight over northern Arizona, he noticed a dormant cinder cone far from anything. He envisioned it as a place where sky and land could come together, carving corridors and apertures that would allow people to experience the sun and stars rather than merely observe them. After purchasing Roden Crater in 1977, he designed corridors and chambers that would bring in light from the sun, moon and stars, the hues and shadows shifting throughout the year. Turrell also consulted with astronomers to plot precise alignments that would capture celestial events, including the summer and winter solstices. The first thing he did was shape the top of the cone to his liking, moving 1.3 million cubic yards of earth to form the crater bowl, according to the Roden Crater website. Workers then dug the 854-foot-long Alpha Tunnel on the east slope, building another tunnel connecting it to the crater bowl. The two were the first of 6 planned tunnels and 21 viewing spaces. Fundraising sputtered, partly because of the secrecy about the crater, and again during the 2008 recession. Construction was delayed, proving Turrell's early deadlines were far too ambitious. Now there is no mention of an opening date on Roden's website. Even Turrell has made light of the slow progress, addressing it in the documentary, James Turrell, You Who Look, a clip of which was posted on Roden Crater's Instagram. Roden Crater will now be seen as a life's work even though I never intended it that way, he says. It's sort of like your friends who never finished their doctoral thesis. Still working on it though. It's coming. Shortly after 4 p.m., a dozen or so widely spaced pickup trucks drive past Roden Crater's unmanned gate, each carrying 1 or 2 people clad in bright orange shirts, some wearing hard hats. Plumes of dust raise into a clear blue sky, trailing the vehicles back to civilization. According to an April newsletter to donors, workers have installed concrete walls and columns for the south space. The site also is being prepped for an intricately crafted instrument of marble and bronze that will track the stars. Officials hope to have the dirt road bladed each time a delivery truck arrives to ensure sensitive instruments will be in perfect condition. As work progresses on Roden, Turrell has allowed a select few inside. Museum officials, art colleagues and a few celebrities have made the trip, as well as generous patrons. Every now and then he opens it to those who don't blink at the price, as in 2015 when guests paid $5,000, plus an additional $1,500 for meals, a hotel room and tour, ArtNews.com reported. A 2013 New York Times Magazine profile of Turrell said, "An invitation to visit Roden is one of the most coveted tickets in American art." Turrell has gone to great lengths to establish a daunting barrier around the crater. In 1979, he purchased 155 square miles of ranch land around Roden, and 14 years later his ranch had grown to 277 square miles, according to the New York Times story. There is still much work to be done. 5 years ago, Skystone officials told the Los Angeles Times the project was about 35% done. The newspaper reported that $15 million had been sunk into the crater by that point. In sporadic newsletters to donors, the Roden Art Foundation offers fundraising and construction updates, but a completion date remains ephemeral. At nearly 40 years and still going, the Roden Crater project has been a part of Turrell for more than half his lifetime. There are no guarantees that it will be finished before he can no longer contribute, though various reports say Turrell has left plans in place to ensure that it is completed. Even if that occurs, the guest list is likely to remain very exclusive, said Phoenix Art Museum curator Gilbert Vicario. In projects like this, the artist isn't thinking about a turnstile gate with people flooding in, Vicario said. It's a very personal, very private experience, and you want to try to control that as much as possible. The project was never supposed to take this long, Turrell has said in previous interviews. He could not be reached for this story. Turrell had planned to finish Roden Crater in 1994, according to a 1989 story in the Arizona Republic. In 2001, Artnet.com reported the project was $12 million and many months away from its final form. Today, work continues with no publicized completion date. But when the site does open, Experts believe it will be a monumental work drawing visitors from around the world. Tom Patton, director of the School of Art at Northern Arizona University, said he visited Roden 8 to 10 years ago when construction equipment littered the site and many areas were roped off. He was astounded by its scope. Within the larger context of art history, Patton said via email, it's generally considered one of a number of historically significant pieces that still exist from that era, of the 1960s and 70s. Noted art expert Alman Ruiz Picasso, owner of the prestigious Alman Rec Gallery in New York, Paris, London and Brussels, told Artnet that Roden Crater is the most iconic work of art in the 21st century. To some, Turrell's work on Roden Crater has become mythic, the anticipation growing as the years pass. That's because the project is as ambitious as it is audacious, Vicario said. It has the three things all curators look for, he said. Risk, danger and impossibility. It's clearly a work that will take a considerable amount of time to finish. More uniquely Arizona stories.